Don't be afraid to make a decision that goes against the grain. Hi guys, welcome back to Yanga today and welcome back to another video. I hope you guys are doing well. Yeah, I'm definitely doing well on my side, and in this specific video I want to talk to you guys about a decision I made during my articles, which was basically to leave audit and go into a TOPP program. And I think this video is going to be pretty insightful, not just for someone who is trying to decide whether they want to go TIPP or whether they want to go TOPP, or whether they want to leave audit or the other way around, but I think it's also going to be insightful to anyone who is, in a specific industry and maybe you're thinking of pivoting or you are thinking of going down a different career path altogether. So I think it's just going to be adding value to anyone who is having those type of sort of thoughts or considerations. So I hope that you enjoy this video, and if you do, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up. So let's get right into the video. So I just want to start with a little bit of a backstory with regards to what that time in my life looked like from an audit perspective. When I was still in audit doing my articles, I was in an audit firm, like a medium-sized audit firm, and I knew I always wanted to be outside of audit. So I always wanted to actually do my articles outside of audit. I was not able to get into the program that I wanted to, and I got into audit, and I thought, okay, I was going to stick this out and I was going to finish my articles. That was the intention. I was going to complete my articles at an audit firm. However, the audit environment in general was just not something that resonated with me, and I knew that I do want to be in a specific sector. I knew that I wanted to be in financial services. And so I basically decided during that first year that I was going to make the concerted effort to try and move out of audit. And I was very fortunate enough because I was able to find basically another training office outside of audit, which was in financial services, and that is essentially where I then completed my articles. So the first part of this video that I want to jump into is basically what are the types of things that are more beneficial if you go towards your TOPP program versus audit, and what are the less beneficial things. So what are the disadvantages of either option? And I think I'll just touch on auditing first. And I think what's also great about the insights that I have is the fact that I have generally experienced both sides of this conversation, or both sides of these two different worlds. So starting off with auditing, the first advantage that I would say auditing does give you, and a lot of people will always emphasize this, is basically that you have a lot of exposure in your hands. So depending on the types of clients that you are going to be planned on, and the types of clients that you're going to be auditing, they could be in various industries. I even remember in my first year, it was actually really, really amazing because one minute you are in, pharmaceuticals, the next you're in media and entertainment, the next you're in another industry. That type of exposure is really invaluable, especially if you're someone who's not sure about what they want to do with their lives or what industry resonates with you. That type of thing can really go a long way. The second benefit to doing your articles in audit is definitely the ability to network better, I suppose. And the reason I say this is tied to the first point, really. With all of the exposure that you are receiving, you're going to different clients, that gives you the ability to network with your respective clients. And I've seen this play out quite nicely for some people, where because they've had a good relationship with a specific client that they were auditing, they then end up working at that specific client later on. And so that is something that many other programs outside of audit may not necessarily offer, and I think it's a really great benefit of doing your articles in audit. And then the third thing that I think is a great advantage with regards to auditing is the possibility of global exposure as well. Depending on where you do your articles, you might be seconded internationally, but even if it's not within, I suppose, within your articles period, even after articles, even right now in South Africa, I think there's a great exodus with regards to chartered accountants, and majority of those CAs are in the audit space, or they did their articles in audit. So those international opportunities really tend to tailor to a lot of people who did their articles in audit. So that is really a great advantage. However, that being said, there are obviously downsides to doing your articles in audit. And I think the first one that comes to mind is the fact that if you've been in audit long enough, it becomes pretty difficult to pivot out of audit. And I suppose there's a number of reasons why this would be the case. And then people just feel that they are pigeoned into staying in audit. So that can be a bit of a stumbling block with regards to that. The other disadvantage of audit is the extensive hours that are required. In articles, when I was still doing my articles in audit, there's a lot of hours that you are going to need to invest. And I don't think it's necessarily the worst thing, if I'm honest, especially if it's the infancy of your career. I mean, you have to put in the hours, you have to put in the work. All the more better, obviously, if it's a healthy working environment and you've got like a supportive team with you. But that is something that you really want to take into consideration, to say that audit can be very deadline driven. In fact, it is deadline driven, which means there's a lot of grafting. And then the other disadvantage with regards to doing your articles in audit is actually the fact that compared to a lot of top programs, the pay that you will receive in an audit program is most likely going to be less. And this is not necessarily always the case. With regards to me, when I moved from TIPP to TOPP, so I moved from audit and I moved outside of audit, the pay increase wasn't that substantial. It was negligible. But for a lot of top programs, they actually do pay a lot more than someone who is, going to be doing their articles in audit. And then with regards to the top side of things, the first advantage of doing your articles in TOPP is, for me, differentiating yourself. When you qualify as a CA and you've got this, this training office, or you've got this specific industry exposure, it kind of sets you apart from the rest of everyone else who has done their articles in audit, because it's something different, especially if you are, let's say, you're going to be applying in a role that is similar to where you actually did your articles in. Then you've already got that foundation, and it kind of makes you more attractive in the marketplace. The second thing, which is basically the mirror of what I mentioned before, is to say that you're more likely to be earning more in a top program than you are with regards to an audit program. And then the third benefit, I would say, you're able to specialize, if I could put it that way, from an early onset. So by the time you're actually qualified, you've got all of this experience under your belt that kind of allows you to be niched in and to specialize right from the onset, as opposed to being more generic in your experience with regards to, hey, I've done a little bit of mining, hey, I've done a little bit of financial services, hey, I've done a little bit of pharmaceuticals. And then the other side of the conversation is essentially, what are the not so good things about doing your articles in TOPP. So the first thing that I will say is that not every single top office or top program is the same. So one of the disadvantages that you'll find is that you'll probably need to be more hands-on with regards to your training. For some other top programs, maybe they're in their infancy, maybe they're trying to still figure out what's going to work. Of course, SAICA is monitoring that and making sure that the program is up to scratch, but it might be a little bit crazy. And I had this experience where the program was pretty much in its infancy, so a lot of the rotations and a lot of the driving of the program was pretty much in my hands. And you already are trying to be focusing on passing your board exams. The last thing that you need is also trying to steer the ship in the right direction, but at the same time, it is your future. Oh, the next disadvantage that I have here, this could be seen again as an advantage or a disadvantage, but I have perception bias. So that's why I said you want to also be intentional about which top program you do go into, because perception bias is a thing, unfortunately. And then the final thing, it can be really difficult to secure a place in a top program. Like I said, I applied to numerous top programs before going into audit initially because I just was unsuccessful until I was lucky enough. But it's very competitive, and I think it's also a thing of because there are only a few spots that are actually available, so getting into that actual program is not necessarily easy. But I was actually fortunate because I had two offers, but one was in Cape Town and I didn't want to move to Cape Town at the time. But it goes back to that whole specializing thing because the one that was in Cape Town was a specific retailer, huge retailer. Um, and so that was a program that really spoke to me, but I just wasn't willing to move back to Cape Town at that time. And then the last part of this video, I basically want to talk to the considerations that I feel one needs to take into account if you are thinking of, you know, do I want to be in this specific route or do I want to be in this specific route? Or if you are in a specific job or not, you're on a specific career trajectory and you're thinking of making a little bit of a move, what are the considerations that you want to have? The first thing that you want to think of is you want to have some kind of long-term vision. Where do you actually want to land up? And for me, like I said at the beginning, I knew from the onset that I don't want to be audit partner. I don't want to really have a career in auditing. I knew that I wanted to be in financial services. So it was easy for me to then pivot out of audit and go into financial services because long term, that's where I've always seen myself. Of course, your vision might change here and there. That's just how life is. But if you are able to think long term, it helps you to be able to make informed decisions today, because then you can clearly ask yourself the question, is this decision going to get me any closer to this vision that I have for my life? Then the second thing that you want to consider is what is the opportunity cost, because every single thing has an opportunity cost. I already touched on this, but just as a practical example, if you have an offer, let's say, to go do your articles at a big four, and you know that secondment is something that's really, really important to you, you want to go international, during your articles, but you have another opportunity that might be in top and there's no international secondment. And so you want to go the top route, but then you must understand the opportunity cost is that you then cannot go, to the UK, whatever that the case may be, during your articles, and that's the opportunity cost. So that's a question that you need to answer yourself. And then the third thing that I have is the work environment. I think this is one of the biggest contributors. Of course, you'll only really know about a work environment when you are in the actual work environment. But I would go as far as to say that talk to people. If you are thinking, let's say you have a job offer from company X, or you are thinking of going to, there was someone who actually was going to be starting their articles at the audit firm that I was at. And they popped me a message on LinkedIn and they said, hey, Yanga, I've got a specific, opportunity to do my articles here. How did you find it? What were the pros? What were the cons? And I did explicitly say that I am speaking from my own lens of experience and I'm speaking from my own vantage point. So my experience won't be the same as yours, but I was able to give some insight. And so if you can collect that data from people, whether it is through popping them a message on LinkedIn, most people are very receptive to these type of things because it's professional, you know what I mean? And then the last thing that I think is really important from a consideration perspective is don't be afraid to make a decision that goes against the grain. When I was leaving audit in that first year of my articles, a lot of people that I did tell tried to discourage me. And I don't think it was from a bad place. I just think it was from a place of them projecting their fears onto me, because now I'm going on the less traveled path and I am going on uncharted territory, and it's scary, because audit is the trusted route to qualifying. So I was taking a risk, but I had made the calculations relating to the risk already. But if you are going to consult with people, which is good, like I said, people will reach out to me and they'll say, how did you find this experience? And how did you find that experience? And I do the same with people. But take that information with a pinch of salt, because at the end of the day, you need to move from a gut place. I do this with my decisions, especially the big decisions. You need to move from a place of, this may not make the most logical sense right now, but I know that this is the decision that I'm supposed to take. Um, so even if it is an unconventional sort of space that you want to go into, if it's the wrong decision, you'll fix it. I mean, life is flexible like that. So those are the things that I personally would take into account before pivoting. And yeah, I hope that this video has, given you some food for thought. And I hope that you guys are enjoying this series where I'm basically chatting to some career tips and tricks and just sharing insights from my own personal journey. Again, thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched until this point, and I'll see you guys in my next video.